So the fifth condition what we apply on statistical data is that they should be collected in a systematic manner. So don't just be lazy and collect the data in any manner. ಬೇರೆಯವರಿಂದ ಡೇಟಾ ಕಾಪಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದೆಲ್ಲ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ scientific methods ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಡೇಟಾ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. And what are these statistical methods? What are these planned methods? That is what we'll be studying in the other part, research methodology. How to plan a research, how to extract the data, what are the types of data, what are the statistical methods available, what are the non-statistical methods available. Those things will be discussed in detail in the other class. Now coming to the data what we are collecting. So we have a particular purpose, and in order to satisfy that particular purpose or objective, we will be collecting the data. So ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಏನೋ ಕಟಾಚಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಯಾರು ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಸೊಸೈಟಿಯಲ್ಲಿ, ಟ್ರೂತ್ ಏನು ಅದನ್ನ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಏನೋ ತಲುಪಿಸ್ಬೇಕು, ಅಥವಾ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಹಿಡನ್ characteristic in the data, what is the trend and tendencies of this particular data. So in order to evaluate that, we'll be collecting the data. So we have a purpose, we have an objective, and once we are very much sure about the purpose and objective, the data collection becomes possible, because only with a well-defined and specific objective, we could look into the proper area, proper field, proper source, and extract the data on the particular characteristics. Say as a medical research student, I could say I want to come up with certain relationship with the number of hours in exercising, number of hours in spent in yoga, meditation, and what is the effect of those things on the age, as well as the blood pressure, as well as the body sugar level, and so on. So this is my objective. So if I'm very much sure about the objective, then only I could look into the collection of the data. So what are all the data I need in order to do this particular research? So first of all, I'd identify a set of patients, and my patients should be such that I should have patients or the people of all the age groups. And then I should identify the people such that they are practicing either yoga or meditation, or they are doing some healthy exercises, etc. And then I should have the people such that variable blood pressure are there, patients with diabetes, patients with low or high BP. So so purpose is stated. So now I'm coming with what type of people I need, what are the parameters I can collect the data. Now when it comes to the extraction of the data, then I'll see how the blood pressure could be devised, which is the most accurate device which can be used to measure the blood pressure, which is the most accurate way in measuring the weights. So I'll come up with certain techniques of collecting the data. So once the purpose is determined or defined correctly, the data collection, specific data collection, becomes easy. So that's why we say data should be collected for a specific or predetermined purpose. Otherwise, data collection becomes haphazard. And then we are collecting the data in order to study what is happening in that, in order to compare what is happening. So as said, I could compare the blood pressure of people who are practicing yoga, blood pressure of the people who are not practicing yoga. So I could come up with certain conclusion there. So if we have collected the data, and if we have properly placed it in order to compare and draw the meaningful conclusions, for the sake we say place the statistics in relation to each other. So these are all the simple statements which cover the entire purpose of statistics. So we see what is data, how to collect the data, how to organize the data, how to sort the data, how to compare the data, and then we'll look into analysis and the presentation. So these 7 points define statistics as a data, and collectively you can say this is the plural definition of statistics. So I'll just take you for the entire definition one more time. You can have a look into this. So it is aggregate of facts affected to a marked extent by multiplicity of causes, numerically expressed, enumerated, or estimated according to reasonable standards of accuracy, collected in a systematic manner for a predetermined purpose, and placed in relation to each other. So this could be one of the theory questions in the exam. Define statistics or define statistical data. Or the question could be, what are the characteristics of statistics? So to explain each of these 7 points, you can use your simple phrases, your simple understanding, as well as come up with some, examples with respect to your field of study. So having looking into this, so we have understood what statistics is, what statistical data is. So we'll look into much of the other theory part in the coming class. ಬರೀ theoryನೇ ಮಾಡಿ ಬೋರ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ನಂಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟ ಇಲ್ಲ. Now we'll look into some data and the data presentation techniques. So we'll look into one of the classification method. Now, whenever I said the statistical data must be large in number, we have collected certain data, and the collected data is called as raw data, and that will be in an unarranged manner. Now, the first and foremost thing is you have to sort and arrange it in a pattern that is, helpful for the further part of the analysis, as well as, the comparisons, the conclusions becomes very easy. So we'll look into classification of the data, and we'll talk about the particular classification today. So classification. So now we have come to the second part. So as said, I have just touched the initial part of the chapter 1. We'll deal with different types of data, what are their collection methods in the next week class. So this is the second stage. So we have some data collected. Now how to classify or group this data. So classification is nothing but the process of grouping the data into common groups, and this is also called as strata. A group can be also called as strata, and this is called as stratification also. Strata antandre a smaller group, and here, if you look into the data inside the strata, they are all homogeneous. Outside the strata or between the strata, they are heterogeneous. So strata is a small group of data or facts such that they possess the same characteristic. So I'm collecting the data on, say, height of the people or number of thefts over a past 10 years in a particular locality, day-wise data. I have collected the data on number of accidents for, say, past 30 days or for a particular junction. So you have extracted the data. So the size of the data is generally indicated by n, small n, and we call this as number of observations. So data ಏನ್ ನಾವು ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂನ ನಾವು ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೆಯೋದು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಏನೇ ನಾವು ಡೇಟಾ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರೆ the major or in most of the cases it is by the human observation method. See, chemistry laboratory ಏನಾದ್ರು ಡೇಟಾ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ರೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆರಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಕೆಮಿಕಲ್ಸ್ ಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಸೊ ಎಷ್ಟು ಕ್ವಾಂಟಿಟಿ ಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಆ ಡೇಟಾ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ. ಅದೇ ಇನ್ ಯೋರ್ ಫಿಸಿಕಲ್ ಲ್ಯಾಬೊರೇಟರಿ ಯು ಆರ್ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವಿಂಗ್. ಸೊ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ಇಸ್ ದೇರ್. So when it comes to the data called recorded on number of accidents, you are actually observing, you're standing on that particular junction, you're observing how many accidents are happening, you are recording the data. So most of the cases data ನಮಗೆ observation method, direct observation method ಇಂದಾನೆ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಈ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ನಾವು ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋ ಬದಲು ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಈ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ಸ್ ಹೆಂಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, because they are all statistical data, they will be different, some repetitions will be there. So what these observations are telling us that they are actually presenting their properties, hidden properties of the population themselves. So they are giving us certain characteristics, and looking into certain characteristics, you can identify what characteristic is common, and based on the common characteristic, you can segregate the data into various groups. Say a simple example is grouping the students. Now, what are all the various methods of grouping the students? So, even 33 students idare. So, basic group ನಾನು ಏನು ಮಾಡಬಹುದು? I can group you based on your gender. number of boys, number of girls. So characteristic I'm using is gender. So based on the gender, I'm categorizing the students. Now, second method of characterizing or grouping is that I could use certain other characteristics. Say I can use the marks. So based on the marks, say if I have given you a test for 50 marks, how many students have scored from 0 to 10, how many have scored from 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and so on. That is one grouping criteria. Now, similarly, I can group you based on the type of hair. So hair color, so black hair, gray hair, any other colored hair people. So I can categorize into three cases. Now I can record your heights. I can group you based on your heights. So if I'm recording your heights in terms of centimeters, so you'll have your heights as 143, 165, 174, 182 centimeters. So I could group you number of students belonging to 140 to 150 centimeters, 150 to 160 centimeters, and so on. So this technique of classifying the data is called as classification or stratification. Now, if you look into that particular group, the data will be homogeneous. ಈಗ first example ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ boys ಅಂತ ಒಂದು group ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. So homogeneity ಏನಿದೆ, all the people are, you know, belong to the same particular characteristic. So their body language, their, the method of thinking, method of dealing with certain issues. So they are all common with respect to this particular group. But when you look into the other group where we have the girls group, so if you look into or if you compare the data or the items here, they are not same. So their body characteristics, their body languages, their thinking way, the way they approach or make decisions, they are all different. So within the group, the characteristics or data present a particular same behavior or property. Within the groups they are different. So this another statistical name for the group is strata. So strata is a small group of people or item or data such that within the strata the people or the data or items, they are all homogeneous. Now in this section we'll learn what are the various methods of classification. So classification ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು, ಡೇಟಾ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಡೇಟಾನ ನಾವು ಇವಾಗ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಆ ಗ್ರೂಪಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರೊಸೀಜರ್ ನ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಫಿಕೇಶನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. What are the methods of classification and why do we need these methods? Now, as said, you could use any of the characteristic or the property itself. So you could use the time as a characteristic. So time andaga, based on the time I'm using your ages, or maybe the populations could be classified over time in terms of years. Your price of gold can be grouped based on the days or based on months. So if you are using any time in order to classify the data, like minutes, days, months, years, decades, centuries, etc., then that type of classification is chronological classification. So you could have crime rates over past 10 years, or past 10 days, or past 10 months. That is an example of classification, chronological classification. This is also called as temporal classification. Now, similarly, you could group the data based on the geographical location. So population could be grouped into district-wise population, state-wise population, country-wise population. Similarly, number of crimes in Mysore, number of crimes in Bangalore, or within Mysore, locality A, locality B. So you're using the geographical features to classify or to group the data. Then the classification is called as geographical classification. So other than that, you're using certain qualities. So qualities are the non-numerical characteristics. So you are using the gender, you're using the hair color or skin color, maybe you're using the certain levels, factors, phenomena, etc. Then the classification is called as qualitative classification. If you are using any quantity, that is number, to categorize the data, that is called as quantitative classification. And in today's class, we'll look into the quantitative classification. So we have extracted some numerical data, how to classify the numerical data. So data itself is a quantity. We are using that itself into categorize the data. Now the question is, why do we need this classification? So first and foremost thing is that when I mean statistical data, it is a large data. The volume or the size of the data is very high. If I have given you, say, hundreds and thousands of certain numbers, say marks of 1,000 students who had taken an examination, then it is very large in size, and you cannot do any meaningful conclusions. You cannot memorize all those 10,000 or 1,000 numbers. So nothing much could be done. So what we have to do is we have to reduce the size. So reduce the size ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ 10,000 ಇರೋದನ್ನ 9,000 ಡಿಲೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ 1,000 ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡಿ ಆ ತರ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. Because if you remove a particular observation or a data value, you're losing certain information on the population, you're losing certain information on a particular characteristic. So every observation has its own, um, I could say, use, or it is giving us a particular characteristic, or it is contributing to a particular characteristic of the population. So we cannot delete any collected data. So we have to come up with certain measures. And one such technique of reducing the volume is classification. So I had 1,000 people. Now I could roughly categorize them into male and female. So I have 500. Now within male and female, I could categorize them into further using the properties. So classification reduces the data. It brings the similarities together. It facilitates comparison. So once I group, I could basically see, are boys more than girls, or girls more than boys. So I'm looking into the marks, are boys scoring more than girls, or vice versa, and such other significant features of the data could be obtained. So that's why we say there is a need for classification, and these are the objectives of the classification. ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಫೈ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಡೇಟಾ ಲಾರ್ಜ್ ಇದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ರೆಡ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಸಿಮಿಲಾರಿಟೀಸ್ ನ ಒಂದೇ ಕಡೆ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಅದನ್ನ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಡೇಟಾ ಏನ್ ಟೆಂಡೆನ್ಸೀಸ್ ಟ್ರೆಂಡ್ ನ ರಿವೀಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಕಂಡುಹಿಡಿಬೇಕು, ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಾವು ಡೇಟಾನ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಫೈ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. I'll just take you a tour around the various classifications here. So chronological classification, as said, it is the classification based on the time. So we have collected the population over past 10 years, or okay, it is in terms of decades. So from 91 to 2001, 10 yearly data is collected here, and we are using years to classify the data. Therefore, it is chronological classification. Now, the same population could be presented over countries, states, etc. That's an example of geographical classification. So here we are dealing with the production of certain commodity, and the sugar and that. So we are comparing the production of sugar over various collected the information, and we have grouped it across the categories like states. So UP, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, and other states in the categorization ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀವಿ. And similarly, we could have the data collected. This is the population data according to census 2011, population in various states. So that is also a temporal or chronological classification. Qualitative classification. So you are observing certain number of people of a particular locality, and you are identifying them or grouping them into how many are office workers, how many are doing business, how many are teachers, bank employees, others, etc. total. So this is the classification. So this is a simple table. So this table is called as a one-way or simple table. We'll look into various categories of tables also in the coming classes. And we'll take the next case, what called as quantitative classification. Now, the first column will be a set of numbers other than your year, month, geography, time, and quality. So we can look into various such numerical characteristics. Like say, if you're looking into the data, you can categorize the people based on the height, you can categorize the persons or particular items like say apples, or any iron objects based on the weights of newborn babies, wages of the persons, age of the people, number of defectives, number of defective mobiles produced, number of defects, number of children, etc. So any number which comes to in your mind, can use that as a classification criteria. So as said, I have certain students in my class. I have to segregate the number of students. Okay, the reason why we need to segregate, as said, I have to reduce the data. and I could have some hidden objective. So I want to, come up with a team for a basketball or team for a particular cricket. So there the height and weight of the student becomes very much important. So I have to first categorize the data and I have to extract the data. Because ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಂಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ನನ್ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಟೀಮ್ ಅವರು ತುಂಬಾ ಕುಳ್ಳುಗಿರೋರೆ ಬರ್ಬೋದು. ಅಥವಾ if I select all the people who are tall, they might not know anything about the basketball. So I should first identify the children with respect to their heights, and then interview them and then see what are their ideas towards the particular game. So that could be one of the hidden objective. And also we have to look into the comparison. So the marks wise nanu distribution ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಯಾವ particular, this is called as a class interval, ಯಾವ interval ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಜನ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಯಾವ್ದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು so it could identify the student as a slow learner or an average learner or a good picker, and I could accordingly assess them separately by conducting special classes or only teaching them the important stuffs or just preparing them for the examination sake and so on. So certain decision making will be there, because of which we have to do the classification. So here I'm classifying the total students. 50 students are in my class. I'm classifying them based on their height. So I'm recording heights of each and every student, and then I'm grouping them. How many have their heights between 140 to 150? 6 students. How many have 150 to 160? 24 students, and so on. Similarly, here I'm grouping the number of boxes based on the number of apples. So ಒಟ್ಟು 45 ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಆಪಲ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ ಅದು ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಬೇಕು. ಸೊ 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, these are the possible numbers per group. ಸೊ 5 ಆಪಲ್ ಇರೋದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ, 7 ಆಪಲ್ ಇರೋದು ಎಷ್ಟಿದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ. ಯಾಕೆ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ at certain states the number of apples present in the box is important. Though the weight is same, number could be different. So human psychology or the behavior is such that if you look into more quantities in the box, you will likely to purchase this box rather than this box. So weight nodalla alli weight same irutte, 1 kg per box andmele ashte irutte. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ನಮಗೆ 10 ಆಪಲ್ಸ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ದೇ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲಿ ಪ್ರಿಫರ್ ದಿಸ್. ಸೊ ನಾನೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಸೇಲ್ಸ್ ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ 5 boxes na manufacture ಮಾಡೋದೇ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸಬಹುದು in future. So these are all certain decisions which I'm interested in. So I'll likely manufacture or increase the size of the box such that the number of apples will be large, so that the sales and the profits will be increased. So various certain hidden objectives and decisions will be there, because of which we need the classification of the data. Now 2 examples of classifications are given here, and these are representing how many items or how many observations are there in that particular group, and these observations are called, or these numbers are called as frequency and class frequency. This type of distribution where I'm using height is called as a continuous frequency distribution. Both are called as frequency distributions. So I could say quantitative classifications leads to what called as frequency distribution. So if you are using any quantity to come up with a classification, then we end up getting what called as a frequency distribution. And there are basically 2 types of frequency distributions when it comes to univariate data. It is continuous frequency distribution and discrete frequency distribution. So we should understand first what is continuity, continuous, and then what is discrete. So any data which could take any particular value. So data ಅಂದಾಗ ಅದು ಏನೇ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವೇಷನ್ ತಗೋಬಹುದು, ಬಟ್ ಇದನ್ ಈ ಪಾಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇದೆಯಾ, ಆ ಪಾಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇದೆಯಾ, ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದು ನಂಬರ್ ಹೇಳಿ ಇಸ್ ಇಟ್ ಪಾಸಿಬಲ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಸೇ yes to that particular characteristic, then that is called as a continuous variable. Say height ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. So height ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ, can height be 155 centimeters? Can height of a person be 155 centimeters? What is your answer? Yes, because in your population or in your class or in your school or in general in the universe, in the world, you could always come up with a person who could have the height very much close or exactly equal to 155 centimeters. So 155 centimeter is a possible value for height. Now, similarly, if I say 180 centimeter, yes, it is a possible value. Now, when we say height of humans or human adults, so generally we say it is somewhat between 140 to 190 centimeters. Very large cases ಅಲ್ಲಿ particular homogeneous group ಅಂದಾಗ Punjabis ಇರ್ಬೋದು, people working in the military, they will have their height very much closer to 180. So we could take a scale, say the rough range of 140 to 190. So adult humans the height ಇಷ್ಟರಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಹಂಗಾರೆ 190 ಗಿಂತ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರಲ್ವಾ, 140 ಗಿಂತ ಕೆಳಗಿರಲ್ವಾ? As said, there are cases, those are called as extreme cases. Dwarfs ಅಂತ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ತುಂಬಾ ಕುಳ್ಳಗಿರೋರು ಇರ್ತಾರೆ. ಬಟ್ ಜನರಲಿ ಕಾಮನ್ ಆಗಿ ಯೂನಿವರ್ಸಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ನೀವು ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡೋದು 140 to 190. ಸೊ ಈ 140 to 190, any possible number could be a possible value of height. So I could say 155.6 centimeters, 183.2 centimeters, 160 centimeters, 149 centimeters. So pick any number, any integer or any decimal number within this range 140 to 190 that could be a possible value for the height. So such variables are called as continuous variables. So variable is a qualitative characteristic which varies from person to person and time to time. ಸೊ ಒಂದು ಟೈಮು, ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಸನ್, ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ನೀವು ಐಡೆಂಟಿಫೈ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ ಅಂದಾಗ ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಒಂದು ನಂಬರ್ ನಿಮಗೆ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ನಂಬರು ಬೇರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಪರ್ಸನ್ಗೆ ಮೆಷರ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನೀವು ಡಿಫ್ರೆನ್ಸ್ ಅಬ್ಸರ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಸೇ ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ height of student 1, say 160 centimeters. Again, if you collect the height of the second student, it could be 160, but it will be different also. So it varies from person to person, it varies from time to time. That is called as a continuous variable. Now coming to the second case here, say number of apples per box. So we are talking about boxes are such that it could fit only 5 to 10 apples, not more than 10, not less than 5. Now can you pick any number between 5 to 10 and call it as a possible value? So as said, can my box have 5.5 apples? Now we are talking about apples. Though there is space for another extra a small or a part of apple, I cannot give 5.5 apples per box. So ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಅದು ಪ್ರಾಸೆಸ್ ಆಗಿ ನೀವು ಅದನ್ನ ಡೆಲಿವರಿ ತಗೊಳ್ಳೋವರೆಗೆ ಆ 0.5 ಆಪಲ್ ರಾಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮಿಕ್ಕಿದೆಲ್ಲ ಆಪಲ್ಸ್ ನ ಕೆಡಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ 5.5 is not an admissible value with respect to this particular study. But you could have 5.5 apples. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಪ್ಲೇಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ತಿಂತಾ ಇದೀರ ಹಾಕೊಂಡು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅರ್ಧ ಆಪಲ್ ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ತಿನ್ಬೋದು, 5.5. So there the scenario is different. But here when it comes to this particular purpose, here only the possible values are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Andre ಈ 6 values out of infinitely many. So 5 to 10 ಅಂದಾಗ infinite numbers ಇದೆ. 5.00, 5.01, 5.99 etc. up to 10 ಅಂದಾಗ infinite numbers ಇದೆ. ಈ infinite possibilities ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೀ 6 numbers ಮಾತ್ರ ಈ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಪಲ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ತಗೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಅಂತ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ಸ್ ನ ನಾವು discrete variable ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. So here I'm not talking about decimal number and integer. I'm talking about the possibilities. ಈ ನಂಬರ್ ಪಾಸಿಬಲ್ ಇದೆಯಾ, ಇದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ನಂಬರ್ ಪಾಸಿಬಲ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು discrete ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So to put it in a simple form, I could say if you have defined a particular range, like say 10 to 20, 20 to 30 and so on, and all possible values could be your data, then such a variable is called as continuous variable. So definition is very simple. A variable is said to be continuous variable if it takes all or any value, if it takes all or any value as a possible observation. Discrete variable, a variable is such that in a given range, so always ನೀವು with respect to range ಹೇಳಬೇಕು, in a given range only some specific values are taken by the variable. So variable is such that it picks only specific values in the given range, then it is called as a discrete variable. Okay, don't be under the impression that continuous variables are numbers with decimal part, discrete variables are integers. No. So you could observe the students with height exactly equal to integers ಇರ್ಬೋದಲ್ವಾ. ಸೆಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ನನಗೆ ಬರೀ 160 centimeters ಅವ್ರು ಸಿಗ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ, 162, 170, 180. Those are all possibilities. So even here, the values are integers, but they are called as continuous because they could be any number between this particular range. So hanganta if I say 200 is a not possible number here, hangandre height ನಾನು discrete ಅಂತ ತಗೋಬಹುದಾ? ಇಲ್ಲ. That's why I said range is important. Range define ಮಾಡಿ ಆ ರೇಂಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಇನ್ಫೈನೈಟ್ ನಂಬರ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಪಾಸಿಬಿಲಿಟೀಸ್ ಆಗೋದಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂಸ್ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಎಲ್ಲವೂ ಪಾಸಿಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಆಗಲ್ಲ, ಬರೀ ಸರ್ಟನ್ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫಿಕ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಪಾಸಿಬಲ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರೀಟ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. So if you are using a continuous variable like height, weight, current age, etc., the distributions are called as continuous frequency distribution. On the other hand, if you are using completed age, number of defective items, number of mobile phones, number of births, number of deaths, etc., these are all called as discrete variables because it only picks several values. If I say number of births, estaagbodu 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in an interval of say 0 to 20, it is only picking those 19, 18 or 20 possible numbers only. Therefore, it is a discrete variable. Now, how many times a number is observed in the data, that repetition is called as frequency. Number of times a particular observation repeats, that is called as frequency. So here if I say 13, what is this 13? So I'm giving you, or I'm observing 13 boxes where the number of apples are same and equal to 7. So 7 apples ಇರುವಂತದ್ದು ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ 13 ಸಲ ರಿಪೀಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಥವಾ 13 ಬಾಕ್ಸಸ್ ಇದೆ. So this number of times a particular observation. So these are our observations. I'm looking into number of apples and I'm categorizing them with respect to the boxes, and the boxes are categorizing based on the number of apples here. So this is the variable, this is the frequency. We indicate the frequency by small letter f. It indicates how many times a particular value is observed. Now, when it comes to frequency here, the definition changes. You cannot say all the numbers, 6 number which are present in between 140 to 150 are is equal to 142. ಎಲ್ಲಾನು 142 ನೇ ಇದ್ರೆ ಅವಾಗ ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನ ಫ್ರೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿಬಹುದು. ಬಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲವೂ 142 ನೇ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಏನು ಗ್ಯಾರಂಟಿ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು 6 ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕ್ಯಾಟಗರೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಎಲ್ಲಾ 6 ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಕೆಲವು ರಿಪೀಟ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ನನ್ನ ಡೇಟಾ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ 6 ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ 141.5, 142.3, 142.6, 141.5. So 6 different numbers, maybe with or without repetitions, could be there. So all 6 numbers are not same. So I cannot call this as number of repetitions, but I could call it as total number of observations. Yes, observations so a particular interval ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೆ. So 140 ಇಂದ 156 ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಎಲ್ಲ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಸೇಮ್ ಆ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಅದು ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಬಟ್ ಒಟ್ಟು ಎಷ್ಟಿದೆ 6 ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಫ್ರೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಫ್ರೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ಇಂಟರ್ವಲ್, ಆ ಸಬ್ ರೇಂಜ್, ಆ ಸ್ಮಾಲ್ ರೇಂಜ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇದೆ, ಎಷ್ಟು ಗ್ರೂಪ್, ಎಷ್ಟಾಗಿ ಆ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ಎಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಫ್ರೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರೀಟ್ ನೇಚರ್ ಬಂದಾಗ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ ಕೌಂಟ್ ಸಿಕ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ, ಪರ್ಟಿಕ್ಯುಲರ್ ನಂಬರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಎಷ್ಟಿದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಫ್ರೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. So now we'll learn how to produce or obtain these particular distributions, discrete and continuous frequency distributions. So that's an example. Again, discrete frequency distribution. Here you are categorizing the families. So family data extract madidira, and along with the families you have obtained the children. So you are visiting every household and you are recording how many children are there. So you have totally visited 680 houses in that locality. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಚಿಲ್ಡ್ರನ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ. Based on the number of children you are present in the family. So now you could come up what is the, in how many cases large number of children are there, what is the percentage that a particular family will have only 3 children, what percentage of families have no children. So all those mathematical measures and rates could be easily obtained from this particular table. But today we'll only look into how to construct this, and we'll also take some numerical examples. So let us take the first one. So we'll start with the very simple cases, preparation of what called as discrete frequency distribution. So data ಏನಿರಬೇಕು ಇಲ್ಲಿ discrete data ಇರಬೇಕು. ಏನು discrete data ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೀವು ಒಂದು ಇಂಟರ್ವಲ್ ಅಂತ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫೈ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಆ ಇಂಟರ್ವಲ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ selected values ಮಾತ್ರ ನಿಮ್ಮ ವೇರಿಯಬಲ್ x ತಗೋತಾ ಇರಬೇಕು. So when we just talk about a single characteristic, we indicate that numerical characteristic by x, and the statistical name for that characteristic is variable. So we are looking into x as the variable, and here we mean only the discrete values taken by x. Now if you look into the data here, so we are recording the number of children per say family, and we are doing that for 50 families. So 50 family visit ಮಾಡಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಚಿಲ್ಡ್ರನ್ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಅದನ್ನ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀರಾ. ಸೊ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ ಒಂದಿತ್ತು, ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿ 3 children, third family 3 children, then you have fourth family with 2 children, and so on. Similarly, you have collected data on 40 families, and 40th family has 5 children. So if you look into this now, you have a range of 0 to 6 as the possibilities. But out of this 0 to 6, only 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are the possible numbers. So these are the total 7 numbers which are considered or taken by the variable number of children. Now, how to obtain the frequency distribution? So in this case, it is very simple. The study is very small. You have obtained the data from 40. You could easily count how many zeros are there, how many ones are there, and you could come up with the frequencies. And the entire data, there are 3 zeros. So frequency for 0 is 3. In the entire data, there are 7 ones. Therefore, frequency for 1 is 7. But if I give you the data where the survey is done for 100 families, 200 families, then counting and obtaining the frequencies become difficult. So we have come up with a mathematical way, and that is by using what called as tally marks. So what we do here is, even I insist this method only. So don't just see the data, count it and write the frequency. Start from the very first value in an order and start assigning the tally marks. So tallies are the small vertical lines erected against the particular variable as and when you come across that number. So ಈಗ first number 1 ಇದೆ. So 1 ಹತ್ರಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಒಂದು tally, ಒಂದು line ಹಿಂಗೆ draw ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ. Next number ಇರೋದು 0. So 0 ಒಂದು tally. Next you have 3, then you have 2, then you have 1, then you have 5, 6. So ಈ ತರ tally ಹಾಕೊಂಡು ಹೋದಾಗ ಎಕ್ಸಾಕ್ಟ್ ನಂಬರ್ಸ್ ನಿಮಗೆ ಕೊನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗೇ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಏನು ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಇರಲ್ಲ, ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ನೀವು ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಬ್ಯೂಷನ್ ನ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. And as said, sir, hange count ಮಾಡಿ ಬರಿಬೋದಲ್ವಾ ಅಂತ ನೀವು ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. Yes, you could do that also, but that happens only under a small scale. So if you are dealing with 10 observations, 40 observations, and if the data is like this, say number of children, it will be very easy. But if I give you the height data with decimal numbers for 100 people, 1000 people, or 500 people, or any big data, you're dealing with number of accidents in the entire city, in the entire state. So there the figures will be themselves larger and much more in terms of the size. So one on the size, the per state accidents for 20 days andaga 3-digit number irbodu, single digit number irbodu, and it will be collected for a larger period of time. So you could have hundreds and thousands of observations. So scrolling all those 100 and 1000 in identifying a particular number becomes difficult. So if you could use a particular software, you could easily do it by the tallying technique. Now, once you come across with the fourth number, and if you're again getting the fifth one is placed across the previous 4 tallies like this, so that it indicates a group of 5, and the counting becomes very easy. So allu sulabha agli anadukkoskara nodi illi idu 5 anta gottagbidutte. 5 plus 2, 7 gives you the total count there. And since we are dealing with the data of 40 families, if you add all the frequencies, you should get the number as 40. So here I'll introduce 2 symbols, one small n and the other one capital N. Small n indicates the possible values taken by your variable. So again, variable ಏನೇನ್ values ತಗೋತಾ ಇದೆ, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ಅನ್ನೋದು 7 numbers ನ ತಗೊಂಡಿದೆ. Those are my small n. And how many such data are there? You have collected data for 40 such families, and this is called as total frequency. And in statistics, total of any particular variable or characteristic